What if I told you that there was a way to garden that doesn't require you to know anything about plants when you start out, and you can grow double the produce you'd normally be able to grow, and it's the way that I learned to garden almost 12 years ago. Welcome to the world of square foot gardening. This is the best-selling garden book of all time, and little story time here, the author, Mel Bartholomew, was a personal mentor to me for over a year when I first started gardening almost 12 years ago. I used to go over to his house, work with him. He'd be sitting on the desk drinking some tea and having cookies, and we'd work on his nonprofit together. And this is how I learned the method of square foot gardening, was directly from Mel himself, but it's such a practical, useful, and helpful way to garden, especially for a beginner, that this video is going to be your complete masterclass on how to get started with the square foot garden method. So when Mel invented the square foot gardening method, he was a retired civil engineer. So he used his engineer's mind to deconstruct gardening and sort of reconstruct it in a way that was accessible to the beginner like myself over a decade ago, or maybe you if you're watching right now. And there's a few major differences with how you garden in a square foot method compared to maybe a normal approach. So the first would be the size of the bed. The recommendation is a 4x4 foot square bed to start out because, as the name implies, you eventually divide your bed into individual square feet. I'll show you how we do that a little bit later on, but then you use those individual square feet as kind of the atomic unit of how to plant in a bed. So if you're planting carrots, radish, beans, lettuce, potatoes, they all have a different amount of those plants that go in per square foot, hence square foot gardening. So for example, if you're growing something like a radish, that'd be 16 per square foot. So he kind of threw away what you'd see on the back of a seed pack that says space every, 5 inches, and then put the rows 12 inches apart. And the reason that works is because he also came up with a specific type of soil that he calls Mel's Mix. Now, I think it's fallen a little bit out of favor these days because of some of the inputs being a bit harder to find. But in this video, I am going to make the classic Mel's Mix exactly as Mel Bartholomew would have done it. But the first thing we need to figure out, now that you kind of know the basic overview, is how many of these beds do you need for a family or for yourself? And then also, how do you plan what to put in each square foot? And for that, I need to break out the sketch pad. A lot of people ask how I plan gardens. And to be honest with you, a lot of the times it's just pen and paper. So I buy these big sketch pads and just start drawing stuff out. So let's call this the epic square foot garden. So the first thing you want to do when you're planning out your square foot garden is think about proximity to your home. So the first thing I'm going to do is just draw a little makeshift roof setup here. This is going to represent my house, and I want it to be close to my house. I don't want to have to move too much to actually access the garden. This is a principle of all garden design, and I'm going to put my garden right in this area so I can kind of walk outside and immediately access the garden. And let's put a little compass here even. Let's get fancy. So my southern exposure is coming in this way. Got a nice bright sun right here, and the light is going to be streaming in this way. It's going to be rising over here, and it's going to be setting over here. So any garden bed that I put on this part of the house is going to be in a good location, and it's also going to be close to the back door. Now what we want to talk about, however, is how many of these setups would you need for yourself or for your family? A good rule of thumb is 1 4x4 box for an adult, and that'll get you a salad a week for the whole season. If you add another 4x4 box, that's all of your supplemental vegetables for a season for the most part. And then if you add yet another, so 3 total 4x4 beds, you would have also things to like preserve or make sauce from for one person. And then you'd multiply that out by how many people are in your home. So maybe you and your partner and then 1 child, and you'd go, okay, well, I want 3 4x4 boxes for me, 3 for my partner, and then 2 or 3 3x3 boxes for my kid, because obviously kids eat a little bit less. So that's a way to think about the amount of actual plantable space you'd need. But then let's get into how to design each individual box. So I'm gonna just draw 1 box, and this won't be to scale. This will just be a touch bigger. Got a big box right here. It's only 4x4. I know it looks like it's as big as the house, but don't worry about that. So we're gonna divide this into fourths. This is the easiest way to plant a garden that I've ever found, is the square foot method. So now we have 16 individual squares. and we're gonna use each of those squares and determine what to put in those squares. This is where we get into the formula for square foot gardening. Every plant has an amount that wants to be planted per square foot. So let's start out with something like beans and peas. I'm gonna put those in these top 2 squares, and those are about 8 per square foot. Then I'm gonna get a little fruity here, and I'll throw a cantaloupe in. That's actually 1 per 2 square feet. So I'm gonna bisect this square right here, and I'm putting that on the corner because it's a big vining plant. So I don't have to waste a lot of space in the bed. I'll have it spill over the corner. And as the season grows, these leaves and vines are gonna kind of come out in this direction. And this is my cantaloupe. So already we've planned out about a quarter of this bed. We have a whole row done. Next, let's get some summer classics in here. So we're gonna put 1 tomato per square foot right here. We're gonna do a pepper, and we're gonna do an eggplant right here. Those are all 1 per square foot. And then over here, let's get into some herbs. So you could do really anything you want here, but in general, 2 per square foot is a good idea. So I'm gonna do a combo of, let's say, basil and lavender. Now, let's get into something like a cabbage. A cabbage is pretty big, 1 per square foot at the most. I'll do broccoli. I'll also do cauliflower. Actually, these are all the exact same plant, Brassica oleracea or oleracea. It is the exact same species, just bred for different parts of the plant, which is pretty fascinating, and also why it's all 1 per square foot there. Next up, we will do kale. You don't have to do 1 per square foot here, but if you're gonna let it get really big, I'd recommend it. You could do 4 per square foot if you wanted to do something like baby kale, and just use it for like very delicate salads, but let's just do 1 per square foot here. Now we get into some fun stuff. Lettuce is about 4 per square foot. So I'll do 4 little circles. Now what you can do with lettuce is you could even treat this individual square. So I'll just draw this really quickly. So imagine this is just 1 square. If you had only 1 bed, let's say, or not a lot of space, what you could do is you could plant lettuce 1 on week 1, lettuce 2 on week 2, lettuce 3 on week 3, and lettuce 4 on week 4. And what you'd have is this perfect cycle of lettuce. So on week 1, you'd only have 1 lettuce in this square. Week 2, you'd have 2, 3, and 4. And by the time you get to week 4, lettuce 1 is ready to harvest, and you replant that. So you'd have a rotating micro succession sow of lettuce in just 1 square. So if you really don't have a lot of space and you can only afford to grow in a 4x4 grid, then this is a way to really make the most out of every single square foot. But for now, we're gonna go 4 to a square foot planted at the same time for our lettuce. Next up, we get into some of the crazier ones as far as density goes, and this would be our green onions. I don't know anyone who has enough green onions in their garden. I always tend to run out, and I wish I had more. So I'm gonna put 16 per square foot. You can do evergreen bunching onions. So even each individual cluster that you plant, you'll have 2 or 3, maybe even 4 or 5 coming out. You can just keep cutting those as you see fit. If you're a radish person, radishes are also about 16 per square foot. And similar to the lettuce, you could do these on succession even in the square foot. You could plant 1 row, then the next, then the next, then the next, and you'd have like 4 radishes a week that you could use and shave and add to your salads or something like that. And then finally, we are going to do some leafy spinach. So I'm gonna do 9 per square foot here. So these are the basic spacings that you'll need. 1, 2, 4, 8, 9, or 16 per square foot, depending on the plant. And honestly, you can really just intuit a lot of this. Radishes are really small. You should be able to plant more than per square foot. Tomatoes can get very big. You should be able to plant less of them per square foot. So this is how you might design one individual square foot garden. And then let's just talk a little bit about the placement. I, again, would put things that want to spill. I would put those on the outside edges of the bed. And you'll notice that this cantaloupe, if I want to grow vertically, I've located this on the north side of the bed. So it's on this edge right here, which means that if I use a trellis, which is a very huge tenet of square foot gardening, growing vertically, then it's not going to be shading out the rest of this bed. Because if I was to put that cantaloupe or maybe my beans or my peas right on the south side, which is where all the sun's coming in, then it's going to grow up and it's going to block the whole rest of the bed. So that's also very important. So now that you know how to design one bed, you could then just mock up an entire garden layout, something like this. And this could be like Kevin's garden right here. And then I could have another 4x4 right here for 3 more. And this could be Eric's garden right here. I don't know who that guy is, but I heard he's a pretty cool guy. So now that we know how to design this, let's get into making the secret sauce, which would be Mel's Mix. When you're starting a garden, especially as a beginner, square foot gardening or any method, nothing is more confusing than what you're supposed to actually put in the bed for soil. So when I worked with Mel over 12 years ago now, he was very adamant that his mix, called Mel's Mix, was the one to use. And I even got into arguments with him. I'd say, well, can't we use this ingredient instead? Or what about this? He's like, no, you have to use Mel's Mix. And you know what? In his honor, I'm going to do just that for you guys today, but I will discuss some alternatives you could use. So when you talk soil, you basically want to balance 3 different qualities. You want fertility, so we're going to add some nutrients in with some compost that I actually made here at the homestead. You want drainage, so we're going to use something called vermiculite for that. And then you want water retention, or the ability to hold moisture in. And we're going to use this right here, which is peat moss. Now, if you're not a beginner, you might be thinking some of these maybe not so great to use these days, and I'll discuss that in a second, but these go in roughly equal parts, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. So I'm going to crack open the peat moss first, and while I do that, I'll talk about an alternative to peat moss that you could use. There's a few. So you could use something called coconut coir, which is shredded coconut husks, and that can be a great alternative. You can use something called pit moss, which is a paper product that we've tried, and we've had some decent results with that. But frankly, the reason why people still use peat moss, I hate to say it, is because it is the most performant for the thing that you're trying to get it to do, which is retain water. That's what I found in my garden. I don't use it a ton these days, but every so often I do have some peat moss that goes in the garden. So I'm gonna go in with just a little bit here, and I've half filled this bed up already. And if you're wondering how much soil, how do you know how much Mel's Mix to make? Well, it's a simple volume calculation. So these are our Epic cedar line beds. It's a new bed that we just designed. North American Western red cedar. This is a 4 foot by 4 foot bed. It's roughly a foot tall. And so if you do the math there, it's 4 times 4 times 1. So that's 16 cubic feet. And I need roughly 1/3 of each of these ingredients. So I need just a little bit over 5 cubic feet of each ingredient. And bags tend to be 1.5 to 2 cubic feet. So I need 3-ish bags, maybe 3.5 bags or so. That's the simple way to do it. And if you really want to get particular and granular about how you make your Mel's Mix, I would highly recommend putting it on a tarp of some kind, mixing it on the tarp, and then mixing that tarp into here. So the next thing we're going in with is vermiculite, which we actually use here at Epic Gardening quite a bit when we're starting seeds. It's really good to keep some moisture in on the top of a seed starting mix. But if you can't find this, which it is sometimes difficult, you can go ahead and use something called perlite, which I have a bag of right there. These are both mineral products that add a little bit more aeration, add a little bit more texture to the soil. And then you've got compost. So this is some stuff that we made here at the homestead. And back in the day when I was talking with Mel, he always stressed the more sources for your compost, the better. He would always say a well-blended compost mixture. What that might mean is if you're making it at home, obviously it's generally pretty well blended, but you might want to grab like chicken manure, cow manure, mushroom compost, and put all those in to make up that 1/3 of compost, because you're going to get a nice blended mix if you do it that way, which is going to help your plants out. So when you build this bed and you fill this up, the only thing you're really replenishing over time is that compost, because that's going to be the fertility that you're going to add back once, of course, you grow a plant. Because when you're growing plants, we're growing these cantaloupes, these peppers, we're actually taking nutrients from the soil, right? They're photosynthesizing, they're taking the water that we give them, they're also taking nutrients from the soil. We have to add that back, and the way you do that is by amending with more compost after the harvest is done. So let me just mix all this up, and I'll show you how you can get a grid set up on this bed. If you are mixing your soil in the bed, or even if you're mixing it on a tarp, really good idea is kind of hydrating that mixture as you put it together, because you'd be surprised how much water soil can take when it has no moisture in it. So it looks like I'm just drenching this right now, but I guarantee if I take my shovel and just scrape the surface, whoop, completely dry. So it's a good idea to kind of fold in water as you go, otherwise at the end you'll be sitting there. Now that our soil is in, it is well hydrated, it's moisturized, let us figure out how to actually build this grid. The easiest way, for me at least, if you don't want to put down something like bamboo stakes, which you could just lay on the surface of the soil, I like to use little finish nails and some twine, and I'm gonna hammer it into this top cap on our cedar line bed. I'm gonna go down every foot and mark this out, and then I'll just tie some twine across so I have a beautiful grid so I can space everything perfectly. So I got my nails in, I've got some twine. This is just like some tomato twine. You could use really anything that you've got lying around the house. And I'm gonna run it across, create a straight line, and then run those across and we'll have a grid. As you are tying up your bed, if you wanna put a trellis in, which I definitely would recommend, one of Mel's big tenets was grow vertically, make sure you put it on a north-facing side, or at best, an east-ish facing side. So this is my sort of northeast facing side right here. Put it on before you tie anything down, because otherwise you won't be able to get it in. We're just using some cattle panel here. In we go. We have our grid, we have our trellis, we have our mix. It is time for the fun part, which is planting out the seeds. So I already designed this garden. I'm gonna try to follow that as closely as I can. But for you beginners, I'm gonna go through every single thing I'm thinking about when I'm planting these seeds out. So the first thing you're gonna need, obviously some seeds, or some transplants. It is not a crime to hit up your local nursery and grab some starts if you're a little bit intimidated starting plants from seeds. If you want to start from seeds, we obviously would recommend our seed company, Botanical Interests. I have all their seeds right here. You can check out any local nursery as well and ask for Botanical Interest seeds. We love supporting our local nurseries. But let's go ahead and start planting my peppers, my California Wonder sweet pepper. So you're gonna need some sort of plant tag as well. I just have these basic ones that we grabbed from the local market. We use these markers called Artline garden markers. They're the only ones we found that actually will stay well written on the thing as you go through the season, because there's nothing worse than like spending all the time actually writing your labels out and then they fade in the sun. I just write the plant, the variety, and the date. And if you remember, peppers are 1 per square foot, so I just use my finger. I'll put a little depression here and I'll do 2 or 3 seeds per hole. Mel actually was a big proponent of 1 seed per hole, maybe even 2, but he was very much a guy who did not like waste. I would remember this all the time. He would save like little bits of paper and stuff like that. So he's very much a sustainability minded guy, and his whole perspective was don't waste seed, just put 1 in per hole, and if it doesn't germinate, just try again. I tend to put in 2, but regardless, that can be up to you. So in we go with our pepper. Now let's put our tomato in. If we remember, that was gonna be our next one. So peppers, tomatoes, and eggplants really all planted in the same way. They're actually the same family of plants. They're what's called these solanaceous plants. So this is an Italian Roma pepper, good sauce pepper. Next up, we're gonna hit the trellis side. So I've got some beans here. These are a pole bean variety, meaning they need the trellis. They wanna go upwards. And this is a variety called Blue Lake, very classic. With beans, it's 8 per square foot, which is a little tight. It's tighter than I'm used to planting them these days, but it does work. I'll do 2 beans per. Actually, you know what? Go the Mel's way. I'm just gonna do 1 bean per. Keep it conservative. In we go, and let's finish out the rest of this trellis line. Changed my mind, I'm going with the broccoli next. I'm doing Bell Star broccoli. This is another 1 per square foot. Really small seed, but a beautifully productive variety here. So I'm gonna just do 2 per hole, right in the middle. Pop my tag in. Trust me, the tag will save your life in the future, especially if you're a beginner and you don't know what these plants look like when they come up. Next to the broccoli, we are going in with our red acre cabbage, probably the most classic cabbage variety out there that is a red cabbage and exceptionally prolific. Next, I'm gonna hit our prolific planters. These would be the 16 per square foot. First is gonna be our radish. This one's called Crimson Giant. There's so many different radishes out there. And since you're planting 16 of them, if you want to, you can get really wild by planting like different radish varieties in this individual square foot. But for me, I'm gonna keep it simple here. Just do 16 of this Crimson Giant. Drop in a seed or 2, and in like a few days, literally, you'll have some radishes coming up. Now we've got these white Lisbon bunching onions, 16 per square. But what's nice about these is you can plant them in a bunch in each hole. So you can put like 3 to 5 seeds in each hole, and you're gonna get an absolute forest of these evergreen bunching onions, which are pretty much useful in almost every dish I can imagine. And I never, ever have enough. So I'm gonna be sprinkling here. We're over on the other side now, finishing out our solanaceous crops, the eggplant, the Black Beauty eggplant. There's so many different varieties here. If you want to tried and true, Black Beauty is that recommendation for you. 1 per square foot, right in the middle, 2 to 3 seeds. Of the 3, so you've got your tomatoes, your peppers, and your eggplant. Basically, it's in that order of how much they love heat. Tomatoes, they like it okay, it's a summer crop. Peppers, they can tolerate a little bit more. Eggplant, you'll find, really thrives in much more heat than either the peppers or the tomatoes can handle, and it might take them a little bit longer to start until the soil does get nice and warm, but fortunately, it's going to be right here, so I think we're in a good spot. Now I'm going in with the rest of my trellising side, and I'm going in with the Minnesota Midget melon. And remember, that was 1 per 2 square feet, so I'm actually gonna plant it right on this line right here. And melons, watermelons as well, they wanna be planted in a mound sometimes. You don't have to, but you want at least 3 seeds per hole, because they're gonna vine and they need to pollinate each other, and there's all sorts of different sort of fancy things that go on, but just a good rule of thumb, plant a few per hole. These will be very vigorous. They'll shoot straight up this. Next up, I have the peas. These are a shelling pea. There's a snap pea that you can grow, snow pea, a lot of different varieties. This one's called Progress number 9, but for me, peas never really make it into the kitchen. They'll shoot up this trellis, and probably I will be eating these before I can even harvest enough to get inside. So on this corner here, I'm going to do a little bit of an herb planting, and I'm just gonna go with basil. It's one of my favorite herbs, and I'm gonna space it 2 per square foot. So I'll do 1 over here, 1 over here. Basil is a small seed, very small in fact, and it produces sort of like a slimy coat when it germinates or sprouts. And it's just kind of a weird seed. It's a little bit slow to germinate. It can take sometimes up to 2 weeks or so. So be very patient with your basil, but once you get it in here, and I'll sprinkle like 3 seeds per hole, once you get it in and it starts coming up and you learn how to prune it, and you can check our pruning guide out on this channel, you will never, ever run out of basil. So once you start it, you're good to go. Next up, cauliflower. Getting spicy, getting sexy on this one. This is Romanesco cauliflower, has a fractal design, very beautiful. And if you grow it successfully, you're gonna be very proud of yourself. First time I grew Romanesco, I was like, dude, I think I'm a gardener now. So you can mess around with a lot of varieties, but I like Romanesco. In we go now with spinach. This is a unique one. It's 9 per square foot, so 3 rows of 3. I like harvesting spinach as baby spinach personally, so that's why this density works really well. This variety is called Oceanside. Spinach is a plant that really likes cool temperatures. It'll struggle in the heat. And so in the beginning of the season, it's a good idea to plant spinach in your square foot garden. And then as the season progresses, you can switch over to some more heat tolerant greens, maybe something like a chard. The last 2 squares I'm gonna plant out with lettuce. This is a butter crunch. Play around with a bunch of different varieties of lettuce. They're so fun, but I'll show you just 2 different spacings because I kind of like doing this in 2 ways. One is 4 per square foot, and that's gonna be for your true heading lettuce. I want this to get big. I wanna actually use like a whole head at one time. So I'm gonna sprinkle 4 per. Then the other is gonna be 9 per or even 6 per. Either of those, to me, work really well for a baby lettuce. So I'm gonna go with 6 per here. And what you do there is you'd harvest the whole head, but you'd harvest it about a week or 2 in advance of when it would be at its full size. So you get that nice, tender sort of baby lettuce look. You could do some really interesting, salads with that. You could do like a gem lettuce variety, and that grows small in the first place. And that'd be a really, really nice sort of delicacy style lettuce. So we have our square foot garden planted out. Let's water it in and I'll tell you what to do next. We are at the point where we can water our bed in. You just want to soak it very nicely. I like to use the shower head attachment, get a nice drizzle on here. Where you'll go wrong is if you allow this to dry out before the seeds germinate and really set their roots into the soil. So I think I've watered this in. Let's check in a couple weeks and see how we're sprouting. It's been a few weeks since we built, prepared, and sowed our square foot garden. And as you can see around you, the garden has changed quite a bit, including inside the bed. So what's happened is plants have germinated, the seeds have sprouted, but they've done so at different rates because of course these plants don't all grow at the same rate. So over here, my radish is not only sprouted, but I'd venture to guess if I was to dig in here and feel around, yeah, I do have radish probably about a marble size right now. Not ready to harvest, but this is coming on very fast. My beans are doing pretty well. My peas are doing pretty well. In fact, I'm starting to see one of my peas start to climb up this little cattle panel here using their tendrils. My melons are up. This middle row looks barren. It's actually not. They're just very small right now. So these were all my cabbages, my broccolis, my peppers and eggplants and stuff like that. All my single 1 plant per square foot plants that once they grow, they're really gonna get big, but sometimes take a little bit of time. And then I'll discuss some problems that you might run into. So over here, you'll see one empty square. Well, what was supposed to be here? It was supposed to be bunching onions. I don't know exactly what happened, but after a few days, I noticed, hey, nothing's coming up. I don't see any sprouts at all. So I'm gonna re-sow. So I grabbed a pack and I actually popped in another round of seeds there. And then you'll also see situations kind of like this. This is the spinach, and you see a bit of a spotty growth pattern here. This one's nice, this is pretty good, this not so much, tiny one there, then nothing right there. Oftentimes, that can be a sign of poor watering. When you see growth that's very consistent in one area and kind of tapers off in another, it just might mean that you need to be a little bit more accurate with your watering. So that's what I'm actually gonna do, is come through, I'll pop another seed right in there, and I'll even fill out this hole right here. And the cool part about square foot gardening is you know the spacing, and it's all on a very pre-programmed grid. So you can just spot check and look and say, you know what? I'm missing an onion right there. I'm missing a spinach right there, and come in and go ahead and plant in to have a backup. So we're at the point right now where I'm just gonna let this go for a couple more weeks until this kind of really balances out and you see a lot more growth, and then I'll discuss what to do from there. Been a few weeks, guys, and I'm excited to say we have our first harvest upon us. We have the radishes. So the beauty of square foot is that different plants will mature at different rates. The radishes are clearly ready. The beans, the peas, the melons, the tomatoes, they're taking a little bit longer. So I wanna show you how to cycle through one of your squares. So I'm just gonna harvest out my radishes. We'll see what kind of stuff we've got going on here. You can harvest all, you can harvest some. It's kind of up to you. Look at this. All of those radishes from a single square foot. And what do we have now? Well, we have another square that we can plant in. And in my particular case, I want to make a nice salad with these radishes. So I want more radishes. So I'm just going to go back in and sow. You can keep track of this if you want in that journal that we had at the beginning of the video, or you can just kind of freewheel it at this point and do what you want. I'm going to plant 9 per, because I want a little bit larger radishes and less of them. So you can modulate the way that you decide to plant and change your spacing for the unique needs you have for a particular recipe you like, or just your preference on how the plants grow. But look how easy that is. I'm in on 9 more radishes. I can just update the date on my little label here, pop it in, and let the rest grow. As we ramp into the summer months, I have to say, the garden is coming into a life of its own. The beans are starting to ramp up the DIY trellis. The broccoli, the tomatoes are coming in. I even have a beautiful head of lettuce that I can harvest for tonight's salad. But I have a couple setbacks. You know, the radish that I planted a little bit ago, raccoon came and tore it out. But that's the beauty of this method. I can just go ahead and transplant back in with some new seedlings and try again. Square foot gardening truly is the most accessible, beginner-friendly type of gardening that I've ever found. And I'm so grateful that I did find it almost 12 years ago when I started gardening and was able to mentor under Mel Bartholomew, who created the method. So I truly hope this has helped you get started. If you want to try the method in this exact bed, you can check the link in the description. Good luck in the garden and keep on growing.